Frazier adding more numbers, more yards to those. Oh, they don't have him yet. Look at Tommy Frazier. How many tackles can one man break? Touchdown.
Husker Nation, we are 17 days away from having a cardboard slice of pizza in our hands, a warm runza, potentially a cold beer, maybe mid-season if Tom Osborne decides to, develop a little bit further into how to make more and more money in this day and age, as if Nebraska needs it. But Nebraska football is here. It's right around the corner. We are just inching every day closer to playing the Miners of UTEP, which we will do a preview on right before the game. We're going to cover it all. If you've never been inside the fan perspective world of Play the Fight Song, you're here now and you're in a good spot. We're going to talk through each week. We're going to tell you about the opponent, what they run, what they like to run, what they've done this season, what they're going to look like. We've already previewed 134 teams. All 134 are previewed on our channel for general college football. So if you're wondering a different team, go check it out on our YouTube. If you're not on there right now, head over there, hit the like button on this video, hit the subscribe button if you like college football. And if you're here, I know you'll love it. I know Nebraska fans would show up for this, so I tried to come as prepared as I could. We want to talk through kind of the changes through the program of the offseason, leading into the season. Then we're going to go through the whole schedule, kind of what I predict. I'm going to try and keep the Kool Aid out of it as much as possible, but I can make no promises. At the end of the day, I'm a fan. This is not the media. I'm not going to tell you things you don't know. I probably know more than you. That's just a little light chirp at you, but I'm excited you're here. We're going to talk about that schedule, and then we're going to talk each individual position group and then kind of the defense in whole, which I think a lot of people are excited about. Starting with the offseason stuff. The excitement's building for good reason. As we do every offseason, we probably qualified, at least made the college football playoff for the offseason national championship. That's just what we do here. And we made a lot of updates to our stadium this past year, which I think people can agree we needed. We were supposed to do a $250 million renovation. Alberts leaves, Troy Dannon comes in. All these changes are coming. Really what we changed is we redid the red on the press box side of the stadium. If you haven't seen it yet, look it up. It looks great. And then we switched sidelines, which is not huge news. But if you've been to a game at Memorial Stadium, you know the sideline we were on absolutely cooks in the sun the first 4 or 5 games, which made no sense because the opposing team was always sitting in the shade. So now that is fixed. One thing I would like us to change that I haven't heard anything about, and we'll probably find out here on August 31st, is I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I thought the tunnel walk last year had terrible timing. Like Sirius went on for 7.5 minutes. It was a brutal experience as a fan. You're kind of clapping for the 6 minute, and you're like, all right, are they coming out now? So hopefully they get that fixed up. But dual tunnels are out there. We'll see which one they do and what they fix when it comes game time here in a few weeks. But let's go into the schedule. Let's take a look at each individual game. I'm not going to preview each team right now. Obviously, we have a ton on each team that we're going to have to cover week to week, and things are going to change as the season goes on. But I'm going to try and stay away from the Kool Aid, like I mentioned. But let's start with UTEP. It's the first time that we've had a non-Power 4 opponent since 2019 to open the season, and it's the first time we're at home since the 2019 season. We rip off 4 straight home games, 3 of them being night games. Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois on a Friday. Those are all 3 night games, and UTEP's a 2:30 game. So you kind of got the spotlight to open the year, as you kind of expect to as a Nebraska fan, or just the brand that it is. But UTEP's a big game in the fact that you can kind of really get the fan base to buy back in with how you play. I mean, if we go in and we win a 21-17 game, you're probably not going to feel as good as if we roll in and win 45-13. I will say this. I know the guys always give me crap on the full show. Check the full show out. Play the Fight Song if you love college football in general. But they always give me crap because I get mad at the NCAA. I feel like Nebraska kind of gets the short end of the stick sometimes. This is the first time Nebraska played 4 straight home games since 2013. We usually, I mean, granted, most teams have one on the road here, week 3, week 4, but this has been a long time since we've had this opportunity to open 4 straight at home, and then we kind of spread it out a little bit. But the first 7 are very favorable. A lot of the topics you hear from the media and from general fans is, the first 7, we should start 7-0. It's easy to say that, but if you don't know about these teams, like Rutgers is a tougher opponent than you think. And we'll dive into that, obviously, when we get to that point. But that team has some talent. Northern Iowa used to be a very talented team. They've kind of taken a step back as a program, but like Illinois should take a step forward this year. I don't expect them to be as bad. But like there's some tougher old Big Ten West games in here. But let's start with UTEP. We'll get to those when we get to them. But UTEP, obviously very important. I think Nebraska wins it. If I did throw a score prediction out at you, I'd probably say something around the area of similar to Northern Illinois last year, 35-10, 38-10. I think that's a successful look and kind of builds the hype, or at least continues to build the hype going into Colorado week 2. Colorado week 2. Obviously, this is the one everybody's kind of circling. As a fan, as a rival, we got to get these guys. We haven't beat them in the last 3 matchups against them. They took advantage of a really, really bad situation last year with their quarterbacks, which we'll get into when we talk about that position group. But Colorado, I think, is the most important game of the season. And I don't feel like enough people talk about it, but it's a swing game. Like if they lose the Colorado game in a similar fashion they did last year, you don't feel good about Illinois, Purdue, Indiana, Rutgers. You feel probably terrible about them. Northern Iowa, you can kind of escape. You used to not be able to, so be thankful we got them when we did. But Colorado, it's just nobody talks about. I think everybody gets that week 3, week 2 power 4 opponent on their schedule, and that's a really big swing game for the rest of your season. I've seen teams fall off after they lose that non-con game, and I've seen teams take off if they beat a team that they're not supposed to. I think Nebraska's a 6.5 point favorite in this game live right now. That will change, obviously, after week 1, as lines do. You got to feel good about Nebraska getting him at home, right? Like, I think that this is going to be an atmosphere that we haven't seen, probably similar to the likes of 2014 Miami. 2021 Michigan was up there. I think people kind of underrate that game in the atmosphere, but this place is going to be a nut house. Like, Nebraska's out for blood, and it's for good reason. I mean, over the offseason, I've seen things on Twitter. I've scrolled around in the deep depths of the unknown of those burner accounts. Thank God I'm not a part of it, but they talk a lot, and it's a newer college football fan, so they don't know that Nebraska dominates that rivalry 49-21. They just know that Colorado's ripped off 3 straight, and Nebraska's worst stretch in their school history. So it's obviously a massive game to both reestablish our dominance in the rivalry, get to that 50-win mark, and then you kind of hope if Colorado loses that game to us, you got to think that they're going to continue to slide down in a new conference, end up in a similar spot as they were last year. But we'll get to that game when that week comes, because we'll go into a full preview of all the changes they had. I'm sure you've seen most of them, but they've had more than you think. Northern Iowa, I don't want to go too deep into it, but that you got to chalk that one as up a win. So I'm going to say 3-0 to start. Obviously, Colorado's the toughest game there, and I can't give you a score prediction until I see that team because it's so new. But let's say 3-0. You bring in Illinois on a Friday night. We played them on a Friday last year. Got to think win because you're at home. If you're 3-0, you got all the confidence in the world. I'm going to assume we would be somewhere within the AP poll at that point. 3-0, Nebraska's finally a little bit has a glimmer of the spotlight back. We'd be ranked 24th, 25th, if not receiving votes for sure. So let's say 4-0. Okay. I said I'm going to stay away from the Kool Aid, but we haven't faced an opponent yet that I'm like, okay, I can tell you right now we're going to lose. But I do have a different take than I've seen most. Everybody's saying 7-0. They should start 7-0. If this was 2014, I'd be like, yeah, you're goddamn right. Nebraska's going to start 7-0. Did you see that schedule? It's not. It's been a long time since we've done that or been even close to it. So why would we say that like it's nothing? Go play on the road in West Lafayette. We've seen teams roll into West Lafayette that should beat them and not. We've seen Purdue show up in games where they don't really belong on the same field as the opponent. Maybe the ranking would show you that. I think JP, who's down here producing the show for me tonight, can agree that Purdue is a team that will sneak in sometimes and win a game that they have no business winning. That's just who they are as a program. Obviously, they have a new head coach as of last year. They were terrible, 2-10 under Ryan Walters. It's a little bit, you got to think it's like that weird spot that 4-0 Nebraska would roll into. I think it's going to be close, but I think we can win it. But I think it's going to be closer than people think. If we roll in 4-0 and produce 2-2, you got to think that we're going to be a 13.5 point favorite on the road or 9.5 point favorite. I think Purdue covers in the situation, but we win a close one, which is very hard to say as a Nebraska fan. How many close ones do we win? But okay, so let's say 5-0. I know we're getting to it, but here's where I kind of sucked the line. I think Nebraska drops the game to Rutgers this year. I think Rutgers is a sneakily good program. I think Shiano obviously has ignited a spark there again, at least on the offseason. It looks like that way. You got Kyle Managai, who's one of our Big Ten players to watch. They're elite running back. I just think that's one of those spots where you gotta have that step back slip moment within a second-year head coach, a new culture, trying to reestablish yourself in the national spotlight again. So let's say 5-1. We got 5-1 right now, and I think everybody would be happy with that, except we were at 5-3 last year, and we dropped 4 straight and end up not bowl eligible. But 5-1, roll on the road to Indiana with a new head coach in Signetti, who is an elite coach. As we know right now, I would, if Nebraska had a different coach and we were searching for a coach last year and we hired Paul Signetti, I would be like, yes, that is very good. That is an elite hire. He's an elite football coach. So you got to feel, I don't know, I don't want to say nervous about that game, but it can be a tough environment. If they rebuy in this fan base, it's not usually a fan base that gives a crap about anything besides basketball. But it's going to be a tough game. I think it'll be similar to Purdue, and it'll be maybe closer than you think. Nebraska rolled in there. I can't remember the last time Nebraska played at Indiana. It was when we were ranked 7th in the country that long ago, a decade ago. So I don't want to give you – I think it'll be closer than you expect in that game if we roll in 5-1. So let's say 6-1 and we hit the mark. We're bowl eligible. We can get that monkey off our back. But now you kind of get into the point of your schedule where you're like, God – maybe 6 wins is good enough. I mean, that we'll take it. It's a step up from what we've been doing, but you got to roll into Columbus and play most likely a top 5 team at that time in Ohio State with the absolutely stacked roster they put together this offseason. The only thing I hope for this game is I hope we're competitive, like in the slightest bit. I mean, we've seen Nebraska roll in as a top 10 team to Columbus and lose 62-7. We've seen Nebraska roll in and get beat 55-0. We've seen Ohio State roll in and beat a 3-1 Nebraska team 62-7. So if they're competitive, I can get away with that, especially with the kind of the roster Ohio State put together. I think everybody has them as a college football playoff lock and maybe a national championship lock in some people's mind. But you got to chalk one up as a loss and just pray to be competitive so we can continue, going to get a couple wins against new opponents who are after that. You host UCLA. I don't think UCLA is going to be good, but I've seen UCLA play in Memorial Stadium. That was 2013, I believe, or 2012. I think we played them in 2012, and then we went out there in 2013. They travel well, but I don't know about Sean Foster in that squad. I don't think most people know about them, but they're going to have some talent. I mean, they're recruiting out of California for the most part. They've got a lot of money. So you got to think they're going to be at least a little better than people are kind of predicting at this moment. And it's not a trap game because you just got blown out most likely. But I think we get that one. So let's say 7-2. Is that where we're at, JP? 7-2. So we lose to Rutgers, lose to Ohio State, beat UCLA. Now we go back to the road and play on the road at USC. God knows what USC is going to look like this year. They brought in a ton of different coaches. They brought in a linebackers coach that coached one of the most successful FCS programs in the history of that division. So they could have an elite defense. We'll know a lot more when we get closer to, but on paper right now, you got to think they're just too talented. And to go on the road and play in November in California, you got to think USC is going to snag that one. Hopefully it's close. I could see that being like an overtime loss type of game. Just that's what Nebraska does. So 7-3. You host Wisconsin. We have not beat Wisconsin in so long. I think it doesn't go talked about enough. I know Iowa, they'll let you know. We beat you guys 7 times in a row, 6 times in a row. They'll let you know. Wisconsin fans don't say much to us, but goddamn, they have been dominating us. They have won, I think it's 10 straight. I don't think we beat them since 2014. That team, we have to get them at some point. We should have had them last year with Chubba Purdy at quarterback, for Christ's sake. And you got to feel better about our quarterback room this year. So we got to get Wisconsin in that late season game. They're going to be trying to be an air raid, come into Lincoln, end of November, and try and run a Luke Fickell air raid offense with Tyler Van Dyke and throw 5 picks to, hopefully at the time, which is a top 15 defense in the country. And then Iowa. Who knows, man? I got an Iowa fan producing the show for me tonight, and I don't think he could tell you if that's a win or a loss. I mean, he'll probably say win just based off recent history, but God knows. It could go either way. If we take the step forward and beat the chase in 3 that they've so long thirst for this offseason that we've watched all the content for, maybe it's a tie game. Maybe we go into overtime, probably lose on a field goal, or maybe win on a field goal. Maybe we're finally over the one score game hump. but God knows with Iowa, that'll be a 2.5-point spread, even at Iowa, even at home. If it was at home, it'd be probably the same spot because that's just what that game is. It's a tight game late in the game. We usually make a mistake. Let's hope that era is over. But let's say loss for now just to be safe. Now, I named 4 losses there. So 8-4. I think that's a very non-Kool Aid filled. I gave us a loss to Rutgers, which a lot of people aren't predicting. But 8-4 seems like a good spot. And I think the fan base obviously would be happy with that because, one, we'd be playing at some time in December. Wouldn't be in Indianapolis per se, especially with the top half of this league. But we're in a bowl game. And I think people can at least get to the next season with a rejuvenized fandom as we have so long, I don't want to say so long thirst for, but that we kind of itch for again, because we still get the excitement through the offseason. That's just what we do. We're Nebraska. What else are we're not looking forward to an NFL team. But I would like it to be like, all right, we went 8-4 last year. Our next step is now we're pushing towards Indy, which everybody else is that's winning 8 games. They're like, what's the next step? And the portal can help us, and our NIL funds can help us. We combined with 1890, so the NIL is just going to get better from here on out. Dan's going to make changes. So that's why everything's looking up and up. And I think 8-4 is where I have this team. And I think people would be happy. So that's the schedule outlook. If you disagree with me, drop a comment. Be like, you're an idiot. They're winning 6 games. You're an idiot. I think it's 11. If you say that, I'm probably going to call you out. But let's get off the schedule. Let's go through the individual groups the best we can without going too crazy. We'll start at the quarterback room because I think everybody wants to have a conversation about these two. These are kind of the newer faces. Obviously, you have Daniel Kalen, who will probably run the 4th string, and then Harburg returns. And you got to think, I think the order I would put them in today after looking into Gramstad and what he brings to the table is I'd probably go Raiola to start. I said this on the show even because we have nothing to lose. Put the 5-star freshman in there, see what he can do. We've never had a 5-star quarterback. See what he can do. If we what's like I said this to the show the other day, what is the worst that can happen? That we don't make a bowl game, we win 5 games. That's our worst case scenario. Well, we've done that before. No problem. Let him get the experience. It's very important for him to get experience, especially within a power league like this and a favorable schedule. You can let him build some confidence rolling into Columbus. Yeah, he's going to have some setbacks. Are his setbacks going to be our quarterback room last year, whose touchdown and interception split combined was 10 touchdowns and 16 picks? Granted, 6 of those came from Jeff Sims in 3 starts, but still 10 and 16 being your split. Like if Raiola put up that, I would be genuinely shocked. And I think the rest of the country would too. That's absolutely awful. Then I would go Harburg in the backup spot. He knows the system. He's been under Rule for a year. He gets Glenn Thomas, so you got to think he's going to develop a little bit further. And then I'd go Gramstad. Gramstad's a guy at Northwestern who's an NAIA program. They actually played in a conference that I played in college. If you're not familiar with my history, I played at a school called Morningside. They're in that conference, so I've actually watched this team play in person, believe it or not. They're out of Orange City, Iowa. He threw for 3,200 yards, just over 3,200 yards, for 35 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. That sounds a little bit like me in college football 25, except that interception number is a little boosted. We won't bring it up, but those are pretty good stats. He's the all-time leading passer in the history of that school. He was the all-time passing leader in the NAIA last year, not all-time, but he was the passing leader of that division last year. But I'm a little worried about the jump because, like I said, I've seen that league in person, and I don't think NAIA DBs, I don't want to say it that way, but I don't think that they belong on the same field as a power conference like the Big Ten, who's also defensively oriented field. I don't think they belong on the same field. I've seen quarterbacks that probably couldn't make it at a high D2 program have success within the GPAC throwing the football. And that's not a shot at the wide receivers or the league in general. It's just defensive backs don't go play in the GPAC or the NAIA that are elite because they're hard to find anyways. So that's the nice way to put it. But I hope maybe he gets some snaps against UTEP, maybe against Northern Iowa if we get up by a bunch, so we can kind of see whether or not he can sling it against Big Ten defenders. We'll get into the wide receiving core, but I think that helps a lot. And then after that, I think you go Kalen in the 4th spot, then Longville in the 5th spot. You have the depth, but like I said on the show, it's young or maybe a little inexperienced at this level. Go with Raiola. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me, but goddamn, just go with him. Let's see what he can do. And I think there is a 99.9% chance we see Dylan Raiola roll out as a starter in week 1. I think everybody can agree. So that's the quarterbacks. Let's go to the offensive line. The offensive line, there's some question marks arose in the last week about this group because Teddy Prohaska goes down with an ACL of his other leg, so he'll miss the season again. It just feels like that kid can't catch a break. So thoughts with him because it's been every year he's been in this program, he's gotten injured. But the depth question kept popping up, and I don't know about the questions there. I think we have the depth. I think it's more of an inexperienced depth because we have Justin Evans Jenkins, who played last year. You have Ben Scott, who's played 20 or more college games and started. Bryce Benhart, who on this team leads the team in college starts. I don't see where maybe the question marks are popping up. Like everybody on this line has started at least 20 games in college at the power level, except for Justin Evans Jenkins now, maybe. I mean, you have Gunnar Gatulia, who's young. Like, these are talented kids. And if you have 4 out of 5 offensive linemen who have started that many games and you expected maybe to have 5, I don't think that you should be as scared as you think. Like, it's okay to have a young guy on the line if the other 4 can teach him and help him get better quicker. I don't know why these depth questions popped up. Obviously, you got to be like, oh, well, it was the tackle position. We had 3, now it's 2. Justin Evans Jenkins plays every position on the line. He did it last year. He played center, and then he slipped over and played tackle. He also slipped in at guard when somebody got injured. Like, that's just how things go. So we're pretty versatile. I'm not worried about the depth there. I think this group will take a step forward. They're going to be pretty good, and you also bring in transfer Micah Mazuka, who's going to be an elite addition with college experience under his belt. So that I don't hate this group at all. I think they should take a step forward. And Bryce Benhart, I wouldn't say this at the beginning of his career, might be the best player on that line next to Ben Scott, which is crazy to say. But that's the offensive line. Going next to the running back room. The running back room, this is the most controversial group I've seen in a long time. I think I've seen fans say, I love this room. It's so deep. We have some young talent. And I've also seen fans say, we don't have a standout back. I get it. We're Nebraska fans. We had the Amir Abdullah era. We had the Rex Burkhead era. They played on the same team, for God's sakes. Even Devon Zigbo was an elite back. Terrell Newby, like those guys were still, I want to say, stand out compared to maybe this group. But I think this group is pretty quality. You bring in Dante Dowdell, averages 5 yards a carry at Oregon. Emmett Johnson, who could be your starter. Ramir Johnson, who has been in the program for 5 years and loves the team. I think those are your 1-2 punch. I think Emmett Johnson, Ramir Johnson are the guys you're going to see majority of the split carries. Gabe Irvin Jr.'s back off injury, and Dowdell, they're kind of built in similar ways to where they're just like these Big Ten backs that are 225 and can run through you. So I think they should both split time. I think they should, if it's 3rd and 1 and they run out Dante Dowdell or they run out Gabe Irvin Jr., I don't think we should be like, oh man, I wish we had Amir Abdullah. Yeah, of course you wish you had one of the best running backs in college football history. Of course you do. But those kids are very good. Like, they're elite. That's Gabe Irvin Jr. I think people need to go back and watch how good he was against Colorado and how good he was against Minnesota. Like, he's a 225-pound bowling ball that could go for 40 in the blink of an eye. Maybe he didn't juke you, but he'd probably run you over. He's an absolute unit. So those 4 are good. And let's not forget about Quentin Ives here in the corner, who is one of the guys that this coaching staff raves about. Got a carry last year. I think he had 1, 2, or 3 carries for 27 yards because it was either we were getting blown out or it was the end of the game against NIU, and he would put together a 14-yard carry. Like, that guy is going to be good. I feel great about the running back group. I'm on the opposite page of anybody who doubts not having a standout player. I think if we stay healthy, one of these guys will show out as the standout player. It may not be to the caliber of Super Bowl champion Rex Burkhead or Amir Abdullah, but they're going to be very good. I like this group. Moving down the line, let's go to the wide receiver room. Wide receiver room. This is probably the best I've felt about the depth in the wide receiver room. I don't know when. I really can't tell you the last time I felt like we've had this many quality athletes in the wide receiver room. Because even last year, you're like, oh yeah, we bring in Billy Kemp. You're going to substitute that with Jamal Banks, who put up 70 catches last year and is 6'4", 215. No, you can't compare them. Oh, we bring in Isaiah Nayor, who played at Texas and Wyoming, obviously more Wyoming, but he's an elite wide receiver. You saw it in the spring game. That's got to be a guy you're extremely excited about. And then how about the young talent from last year? Malachi Coleman, Jaden Doss, Jalen Lloyd. You're talking about 5 right there, and you didn't even mention Alex Bullock, who started a majority of games last year and is a pretty good blocker on the outside. How about Ja'Cory Barney Jr., who can slip in that slot as a freshman? I mean, we're naming names here, and I don't think I could tell you like two standouts. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda jumps off the injury list. This is the best I felt about our wide receiver core in a very long time. And if they can stay healthy, should be a scary group. We don't have to change the graphic because I didn't make one for it, but the tight end room's good too. Thomas Fidone, Carter Nelson, 4-star recruit. You keep him home. He'll make an impact in the slot as a freshman. And you just add him into that receiver room. They said he's going to play more as a receiver this year. We've got plenty of them. So Fidone, Borkature, like those guys are back. We're deep at the skill position. I really like what we have at running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Obviously, the question mark lingers where it should, and that's the quarterback position. But I think that group, it would be very hard to take a step back. But I think obviously you got to feel better about it, bringing in a quarterbacks coach and the talent you brought in. So that is the wide receiver core. Let's transfer to the defense just to kind of wrap everything up quickly. Obviously, we'll go more into depth week to week as we learn more. What do you want to call this? The spring season? Now, fall camp season, full swing. They just scrimmaged. They said it went well. Tony White was sweating bullets on the podium today, but he shouldn't be because this group seems to be elite again, as I think kind of is under the radar nationally. And EA Sports College Football 25 tells you this defense is as good as the offense last year. Get out of here. Get out of town. This was a top 15 defense in the country, and they're in one of the best defensive leagues in college football. So they're with elite talent within that category. So I'm excited about this defense starting on the D line. You bring back Ty Robinson, you bring back not Nash Hutamaker, bring back Jamari Butler. But I think a lot of people are sleeping on this name. And I want you to remember this when I say this, because in 6 weeks, when he is 9 sacks into the season, you're going to be like, wow, you know what? He was right. Cam Lenhart is an elite athlete that I am glad stayed at Nebraska, because I think a lot of people wrote him off last year after he kind of got banged up. But he had an elite game against Colorado. Granted, I don't know very many D linemen that didn't have an elite game against Colorado, but he put back-to-back sacks together, and we really never heard much of him on the field throughout the rest of the year, red shirts. But this dude's going to be very good. How about James Williams, the sack man, who puts together 3 sacks in the last 5 games of the season from the scout team? For the scout team to now being one of the names that you're going to see pretty consistently. They just talked to him today, and he seems super excited about the group. How about the young talent? How about Vincent Carroll Jackson? I mean, the D-line group, you got to feel good about, especially with the depth. But I think Cam Lenhart can be the guy that can maybe sneak in there and split time with Jamari Butler. But he's going to be an elite athlete within this conference, and I don't think people talk about him enough. So Cam Lenhart, remember that name right now. Transferring to the defense in general, let's talk about Tommy Hill. Everybody wants to talk about him. He's expected to be a higher round draft pick for Nebraska. I think Nash will too, and Ty. But Tommy Hill's guy that his coaching staff raves about. He's a guy that's been in the program now for enough games that you got to feel good about his development. But he took a step forward last year. I think he struggles a little bit in man coverage, but he's going to be the kind of go-to guy on this defense when you need somebody to make a play. He'll cover most teams' best wide receiver. He's the highest grading returner according to PFF on this defense. And then alongside of him, kind of back there at that safety position, you bring in I shouldn't say bring in. He's been in the program for a long time. Isaac Gifford, who just loves being a Husker. I think everybody's listened to his speeches and Chasing Three. If you haven't watched those, watch them. An elite Husker, and I think he is going to be one of those late round draft picks that ends up making a good impact in the NFL. I think he is that level. I mean, his brother's already doing it for the Cowboys up there, and the legacy should continue on, because I'm a big Isaac Gifford guy. I love what he does. Other guys on the defense, Javen Wright returns, obviously pictured, but then you add Stephon Thompson from Syracuse. It's going to be a good guy. If he can learn the playbook, I know they said he was struggling with it. He's going to be a guy that's going to make an impact. John Bullock, you get him back. The linebacking core is maybe a little bit smaller, but they're athletic. They're going to be there to make tackles. The jack position is always up for grabs. But there's young talent they brought in on this defense too that is going to make an immediate impact. I think the question mark lies maybe at corner. You got Tommy Hill on one side, should be Bly Hill on the other. I feel really, really good about this defense in the 3-3-5. They've got a year under their belt now after learning the initial scheme, and we've got the depth to rotate 8-9 guys at the defensive back position, which is the most important part of that 3-3-5, and the defensive line's elite to still create pressure with only 3 down linemen, which is uber important in the Big Ten, especially with some of these quarterbacks. So that is what I have on each individual group. I want to talk about the special teams. I don't have a graphic, so you can blow me back up. But Tristan Albano, I don't believe he gets enough. I don't want to say love, but I think he gets too much hate. You take a look at what this kid did last year. He goes 5 for 5 in the state title game. You offer him a full scholarship. He gets on campus. And you would have thought that he went 10 for 35 with the way people talk about him, especially the fans I consistently talk to. Sometimes the media kind of brings him up and they're like, yeah, he needs to get better. Our special teams were horrible. He was 27 for 27 on PATs. That shouldn't be a question, but as everybody can tell from 2022, sometimes that's a question. It is a question, and it wasn't with him last year. So 27 for 27 on PATs, as he should, but he was 9 for 15 on field goals. I don't know if you guys know this, but we haven't had like an Alex Henry in quite some time, but 9 for 15 isn't like the end of the world. 2 for 2 from 29 yards and in, 4 for 5 from 30 to 39 yards. And then his struggle range, which is, I would say, a good majority of college kicker struggle range, was 40 to 49, and he was 2 for 7. That's where literally all of his misses came from besides the one, and he was 1 for 1 from 55 into the wind. So you know he's got the leg power. Another year, hopefully, after being a true freshman and kicking in Big Ten games, you can kind of take a deep breath and relax yourself enough to improve on that number. But yeah, I get it. 60% of field goals made. This kid's terrible. Get him out. We need a new coach. We got a couple of young guys that can help too, but I think Albano's still the guy if he's healthy. I know he missed the beginning of fall camp, but I think he gets way too much hate, and he's got the leg power, and he's going to figure things out in his second year. So I'm a big Tristan Albano guy. He should still be out there. But all right, that is everything. We covered the schedule. We covered each individual position group. That's the full season kind of preview outlook on the schedule and each group of what I see right now before. And this is August 13th. So things could change even next week in fall camp. Somebody could go down, and now we're talking about a new name. But that's kind of what you got to think as a Husker fan rolling into this season for each group. If you disagree, drop a comment, because I'd be interested to hear what you say. This is your show as well. I want everybody to kind of conversate here, because I think this is a good open-ended conversation with this team preseason, because there's question marks, newcomers, and it's only up from where we're at. We're going to a bowl where that's what we're going for this year, and then we build off of that. That's obviously step point one, but then all of a sudden when you get to that 8-win range, all of a sudden next year it's all right, next nine wins, 10 wins, and then we sneak into the playoff because there's 14 teams at that point now. So this is a big year both for college football in general, but for Nebraska especially, to get at least back to being competitive and where they were at for a majority of the time under Bo. Because all of a sudden you rip off 9-3 seasons in this style of conference, you're in a conversation to not make it to Indy perhaps, but you're probably in the conversation to sneak in at large 14-team playoff. So it's a huge year to kind of reestablish yourself. And I think that's where we should leave it. So we'll see you soon for the UTEP preview, which we will dive into everything UTEP. And I know you don't know nothing about them. So come back and see me. Check out Play the Fight Song on all platforms, YouTube, Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Check it all out. It's all college football content all the time. It's the only thing that matters, especially in this state. So shout out you for being here. We'll see you next time. Go Big Red.